"The Battle of Assaye in 1803 was my finest hour," declared Arthur Wellesley, the future Duke of Wellington, who later claimed it outshone even his triumph at Waterloo in 1815. In a letter to his brother, he called Assaye the bloodiest for the numbers that I ever saw, describing the staggering loss of a third of his 4,500 to 6,000 troops as he personally led charges against a Maratha army nearly 10 times larger. "I hope I shall never see such a loss as I sustained on the 23rd of September, even if attended by such gain," he wrote. The raw intensity of outmaneuvering 40,000 Marathas with a tiny, battered force shaped Wellesley's legend, making Assaye, in his words, his best thing. But what if the Marathas, with their vast empire and 100 million people, had turned the tables? Welcome to a what-if journey where we imagine the Marathas using the genius of Pyrrhus of Epirus, a Greek king who outsmarted Rome, to build a low-cost, unstoppable army. Could they have crushed the British East India Company in the Anglo-Maratha Wars from 1775 to 1818? Let's dive into this epic tale of strategy, numbers, and lost opportunities. Picture the Maratha Empire at its peak, sprawling across 1,000,000 square miles of central India, with a population that dwarfed Britain's. Their cavalry, tens of thousands strong, could strike like lightning, vanishing into the hills. Yet, in battles like Assaye in 1803 or Kirki in 1817, they faced a formidable enemy, the British East India Company, with disciplined sepoys, devastating artillery, and cunning alliances with states like Hyderabad. The Marathas often outnumbered the British 4 or 5 to 1, as at Assaye with 40,000 against Wellesley's 6,000. But to win consistently, they needed ratios of 5 to 10:1, like their crushing victory at Vadgaon in 1779, where 30,000 to 40,000 Marathas overwhelmed 2,600 British, a 12-1 rout. Why did they falter? Disunity among leaders like the Peshwa, Scindia, and Holkar fractured their strategy. Their cavalry-heavy armies lacked the disciplined infantry and artillery to match British firepower. And then there were the Europeans, mercenaries whose betrayals at key moments, like Assaye, tipped the scales. Europeans didn't fight in Maratha ranks but shaped their armies as trainers and commanders. In the First Anglo-Maratha War, French officers like Benoit de Boyne transformed Mahadaji Shinde's forces, drilling infantry to rival British sepoys. At Vadgaon, this paid off, with Maratha cavalry and trained units forcing a British surrender. But in the Second War, European defections hurt badly. At Assaye, French commander Pierre Perrin abandoned Scindia's 10,000 European trained troops, leaving them leaderless against Wellesley's onslaught. By the Third War, British treaties like Bassein in 1802 blocked European hires, leaving Maratha forces outdated at battles like Kirki, where 20,000 to 30,000 struggled against 8,000 British, or Koregaon in 1818, where even a 20-1 ratio failed against 800 dug-in defenders. These betrayals weren't the only problem. Maratha disunity and British tactics were bigger, but they caused crucial battles. What if the Marathas had learned from a master strategist to avoid these pitfalls? Enter Pyrrhus of Epirus, a 3rd century BCE king who took on Rome in the Pyrrhic War. Pyrrhus was a genius at studying his rivals, Macedon's rock-solid phalanxes, Thessaly's lightning-fast cavalry, Seleucids' terrifying war elephants, and Greek mercenaries' flexibility. He blended these into a combined arms army, where each unit amplified the others, winning at Heraclea in 280 BCE against Rome with near equal numbers, about 25,000 to 20,000. At Asculum in 279, his 40,000 outfought a similar-sized Roman force, though at a heavy cost, hence the term, Pyrrhic victory. His secret was synergy. Infantry held the line, cavalry flanked, elephants shocked, and skirmishers harassed. But Pyrrhus had weaknesses. Epirus's tiny population of 300,000 couldn't replace his 7,500 losses, his supply lines stretched thin in Italy, and allies like the Samnites defected. The Marathas, with their massive population and home turf, could sidestep these limits. Let's apply Pyrrhus's thinking to the Marathas. First, he studied rivals to steal their best ideas. The Marathas could have analyzed British sepoys, trained to fire muskets in deadly volleys, and Mysore's rocket artillery, which terrorized enemies under Tipu Sultan. Instead of paying European officers 1,000 rupees a month, they could have trained Indian officers in British drills and Mysorean rocket tactics, cheap and loyal. Pyrrhus's combined arms approach mixed diverse units for maximum impact. The Marathas, too reliant on 20,000 to 30,000 cavalry, needed infantry to stand firm and rockets to disrupt British lines, creating a balanced force to win at lower ratios than 5-1. Imagine their cavalry raiding British supplies, infantry holding ground, and rockets sowing chaos, just like Pyrrhus's elephants rattled Roman legions. Pyrrhus exploited Rome's weak cavalry and inexperience with elephants. The Marathas could have targeted British vulnerabilities. Their armies were small, often 7,000 to 12,000, and their supply lines from ports like Bombay were long and exposed. Maratha cavalry, like Holkar's raiders in 1804, could have cut these lines, while massed infantry and rockets overwhelmed British troops in battles. At Asai, Wellesley's 6,000 faced 40,000 Marathas but won because of disunity and weak firepower. A balanced Maratha army could have turned that 6-to-1 ratio into a rout. Pyrrhus unified his command to make his army click. The Marathas, split by factionalism, needed a supreme commander, say, a strengthened Peshwa, leading a unified council, maybe using hostages to keep Scindia and Holkar in line, ensuring 60,000 troops moved as one. Funding was the Marathas' biggest hurdle. Their taxes, like Chauth, brought in 7 to 15 crore rupees a year, but disunity wasted it. Scindia spent crores annually on just 10,000 European-led troops. Pyrrhus funded his campaigns with local mines, Ptolemaic loans, and plunder. The Marathas could have sought French loan as Napoleon was eager to undermine Britain post-1798, centralized taxes in a Pune treasury, and used cavalry to raid British supplies, like at Surat in 1800. With India's iron, wood, and labor, they could have mass-produced muskets and rockets locally, slashing costs. This would have let them field a large army without breaking the bank, unlike Pyrrhus's overstretched campaigns. What would this Maratha army look like? A 60,000 strong force, costing just 1.8 crore a year, hitting that 5-to-1 or 10-to-1 ratio against British armies of 7,000 to 12,000. Picture 30,000 light infantry, trained by Indian officers in basic musket volleys and bayonets, at 15 rupees a month, 4.5 lakh monthly. Add 15,000 rocket artillery, using Mysorean rockets at 100 rupees each, with gunners at 20 rupees a month, 3 lakh monthly plus 10 lakh upfront for 10,000 rockets. Then, 15,000 light cavalry, the Maratha specialty, at 40 rupees a month, 6 lakh monthly. Total, about 13.5 lakh a month, or 1.8 crore a year, affordable with unified taxes and a French loan of 1 crore, compared to Scindia's wasteful spending. Let's see this army in action. At Asai in 1803, 40,000 Marathas faced 6,000 British, a 6-to-7:1 ratio, but lost due to disunity and Perrin's betrayal. Add 20,000 troops, 10,000 infantry, 5,000 rockets, 5,000 cavalry, for 60,000, a 10-to-1 ratio. Infantry hold Wellesley's line, rockets scatter his artillery, and cavalry flank his rear, potentially wiping out his force before he became Wellington. At Kirki in 1817, 20,000 to 30,000 Marathas faced 8,000 British, 3-to-1 at best. Add 30,000 troops for 60,000, a 7.5-to-1 ratio. Rockets disrupt British squares, infantry pin them, and cavalry cut their retreat. Even at Koregaon, where 20,000 Marathas failed against 800 British, this army could have used rockets and infantry to break fortifications, not just swarm with numbers. The Marathas had advantages Pyrrhus never dreamed of. Their 100 million people could replace losses, unlike Epirus's 300,000. Forts like Raigad and Sinhagad could store supplies, avoiding Pyrrhus's long supply lines. A Maratha council, with loyalty enforced like Vercingetorix's Gallic alliance, could have unified factions, unlike Pyrrhus's defecting Samnites. This army might have won key battles, forcing the British into treaties to preserve Maratha power, like the Treaty of Salbai in 1782. But the British had industrial might and allies like Hyderabad, so long-term victory would have needed political reforms too. Could Pyrrhus's genius have saved the Marathas? A 60,000 strong, low-cost army, 30,000 infantry, 15,000 rockets, 15,000 cavalry, could have turned defeats into triumphs. It's a story of strategy beating raw numbers, of what might have been if the Marathas had unified and innovated. What do you think? Could this have changed India's history? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like button, and subscribe for more historical what-ifs. Until next time, keep exploring the past.